Have you ever noticed that the world often rewards the bad, while the good seem to struggle, or even lose? Why is it that the kind-hearted, generous people often find themselves in the worst situations? Are good people really idiots? This isn't just a question for Usits, a question Dostoevsky explored in The Idiot. In this video, we'll dive deep into one of the most paradoxical ideas ever proposed by a writer. That good, virtuous people who are supposed to be celebrated end up being seen as idiots. But is there more to this idea than meets the eye? What makes good people vulnerable? And why do those with the best intentions sometimes face the harshest consequences? By the end of this video, you might start looking at goodness in a whole new light. Dostoevsky's The Idiot, a glimpse into the heart of goodness. In Dostoevsky's novel, The Idiot, the protagonist, Prince Mishkin, is a man of extraordinary kindness and innocence, someone who embodies the concept of goodness. But as the story unfolds, we see that his honesty and purity become a burden. His attempts to live with a sense of moral integrity are misunderstood, and the world around him seems to treat him as if he's a fool. The question arises, how does someone as good as Mishkin, who genuinely desires to help others, end up in such despair and tragedy? Is it because of his goodness, or because the world is simply too cruel and selfish for such a pure soul? Dostoevsky shows us that goodness in a corrupt world is often viewed as weakness. In a society driven by power, manipulation, and self-interest, people like Mishkin are either ignored, ridiculed, or taken advantage of. This central theme of The Idiot raises an important question. Can goodness survive in a world that is inherently unfair? The concept of idiot and the society's reaction to goodness. In The Idiot, the term idiot is used ironically. Mishkin is not a fool in the traditional sense. He isn't mentally deficient. He's simply pure, naive, and unwilling to engage in the moral compromises that others embrace. Society, however, doesn't see him for what he is. Instead, they see his goodness and innocence as a form of ignorance. In the world of Dostoevsky's novel, it's not unusual for good people to be perceived as gullible or naive. People who refuse to play the power games, avoid manipulating others, or stand firm on moral grounds are often seen as incapable of surviving in the real world. And in The Idiot, society's reaction to Mishkin reflects this reality. In our own world, good people often face the same skepticism. Their reluctance to conform, their inability to lie or deceive, makes them vulnerable to exploitation. What is viewed as good is often disregarded as foolishness or weakness. Is that why good people tend to get hurt the most? Perhaps the problem isn't with their goodness, but with how society defines success, the corruption of the human spirit. Why does goodness fail? Dostoevsky didn't just write The Idiot to explore the moral dilemmas of one man. His portrayal of Mishkin's suffering reveals a deep and tragic flaw in human nature, the corruption of the spirit. Mishkin, despite his best efforts, cannot escape the destructive influence of the world. In a society that values materialism, power, and success over kindness and compassion, Mishkin's untainted goodness becomes a burden. Dostoevsky's exploration of human nature shows us that goodness, while virtuous, isn't always practical. In a world driven by self-interest, it's often the morally compromised characters, those who understand and play by the rules of power, who thrive, while the good ones are left behind, exploited, or hurt. The irony of the idiot is that the pure-hearted are often punished for the very qualities that should be celebrated. But what does this tell us about the world we live in? Does being good mean you have to suffer? Or is there another way to live with integrity and still survive in a ruthless world? The tragic hero Mishkin's struggle and the burden of goodness. Prince Mishkin is often considered one of the great tragic heroes in literature. His purity of heart and moral uprightness constantly clashed with the corruption of the people around him. Despite his attempts to do good, his honesty and vulnerability put him in a vulnerable position. He is used by others, betrayed, and taken advantage of. His inability to navigate the complexities of society ultimately leads to his mental collapse and downfall. Dostoyevsky shows us that being good isn't a guarantee of happiness or success. Mishkin's struggle serves as a reflection of how society often punishes the very virtues that make us human. And yet, Mishkin doesn't abandon his goodness. His strength lies in his unwavering commitment to his moral beliefs, even if it leads him to destruction. The tragedy of Mishkin is that he is a man who simply cannot exist within a world that doesn't value goodness. Instead of conforming, he chooses to stay true to himself, no matter the cost. His story raises a difficult question. Is it possible to be truly good in an unforgiving world? Why do we still admire goodness? Despite the harsh realities depicted in the Idiot, Dostoevsky's portrayal of Mishkin still resonates deeply with readers. His story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that goodness is often not rewarded in a world that values power, wealth, and manipulation. But at the same time, Mishkin's goodness is a kind of beacon of hope, a reminder of what humanity is capable of when we act with integrity and compassion. The question that arises is, if goodness often leads to suffering, why do we still value it? Why do we admire people who act out of kindness and selflessness, even though the world might treat them as fools? Perhaps it's because, deep down, we recognize that goodness is the highest form of human potential. It might not always win, but it reminds us of what we should be striving for. In a world that can often seem cold and heartless, the Idiot asks us to reconsider what it means to be truly good. Are we willing to be idiots in the eyes of society, or will we conform to the world's demands? The power of goodness in a world of fools. So, why are good people often considered idiots? It's because society doesn't value them for their purity, honesty, or compassion. Instead, they are seen as naive, gullible, and incapable of navigating a world driven by self-interest. However, Dostoevsky's The Idiot suggests that perhaps it is this very purity of heart that makes Mishkin, and those like him, heroic figures. They stand firm in their moral beliefs despite the odds, and they remind us of the importance of remaining true to ourselves. As we move through life, we are faced with a choice. Do we want to be like Mishkin, living our lives with kindness and integrity, even if the world doesn't reward us for it? Or do we want to conform to the world's expectations, sacrificing our true selves for the sake of success? If you believe in the power of goodness, like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more deep dives into philosophy and literature. And don't forget to hit the notification bell for the latest videos. Do you think good people are idiots? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.